Once again, you're watching Fairfield Public Access Television, Channel 9. And once again, Connie Boyer and I are here to host our show, Opening Fairfield Doors. This week's show is also sponsored by, appropriately, Whitney Monument. Their 5 generations of serving the Fairfield community. Thank you, Kent and Rhonda and family, for doing that. That helps out with our budget a little. And Connie, we're here again with Verda Baird, and we're going to talk about the cemetery. And this is just so interesting. I can't wait to talk about it. We're here. Well, first let's tell why we're here, and that's our mission statement.
Okay. I think next time around I'm going to try to have this memorized. By opening the doors into the lives of people and places in the Fairfield community, we will strive to promote awareness, understanding, and appreciation for one another.
And this is, we're opening the door to our past and our heritage right here in, we're at the cemetery, but this is more than just Evergreen Cemetery, more than I knew about, and we have the expert here to help us learn and share some really neat information.
Oh, we're just gonna have fun today.
Okay.
Many people don't realize there are 2 separate cemeteries here. And this is the dividing line. You're a big block and a quarter from B Street, and we're on Stone Street. And I want you to realize that the old Fairfield Cemetery is a tax-supported cemetery, and Evergreen is not. It's a non-profit organization, and they accept donations. They have their bylaws set up so that they can accept donations. I think now they've made it known in the paper just here in the last
Recently.
2-3 weeks.
Recently.
And so it's something to think about. I think they're using it for more shrubbery maybe, and just general use.
And as we walk around in the parts of the cemetery, maybe we'll see some things that need to be done or could be done, and what the money could be used for. Just, you'll see it visually.
Do you know how much taxes, though, actually go to the old part of the cemetery?
Not at all. Can't even tell you.
Well, it's interesting that there are 2 parts. I don't think I knew that. If I did, I forgot.
Yeah.
This doesn't go all the way back to the wooden fence, the old city cemetery. Behind old Fairfield Cemetery is first edition of Evergreen, and it is not too big of an area. There's no fence showing you here's the dividing line, just like there's no fence right here showing you the dividing line.
Now, you do have a map with you, and if we can show it for the camera, I think this was interesting. It's
This is not the whole, it'd be 3 times this long if I had all of Evergreen on there.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
So this shows this blank corner now. This is where the old city cemetery is. Behind that is the first edition of Evergreen. From here over to the edge is what's the original old plat. And if you can really, you don't realize just driving through in your car that there's 2 wagon wheels laid out up here in circles. And Clement Jordan, who was the one that donated the first land for Evergreen Cemetery in 1870, he's buried in one of those circles. We'll visit the circles.
It is. It's interesting. If they had some kind of architect lay this out, or someone locally if they did it.
Scott Jordan told me once that this was laid out similar to a cemetery back in Maine where the Jordans came from.
I think
You've probably heard that.
That rings a bell. I remember hearing
So this
that.
was Scott's
great-grandfather?
I was going to say grandfather, or anyway, from his family. Okay.
And now I brought just a map of this is just the old city cemetery. This whole cemetery was not plotted out in lots. And there's a part here just called the public burial ground, and it's very hard for me to find a stone if I want to take a picture for somebody out of state to actually find it in that area. Otherwise, these are all laid out in lot numbers, and it makes it lots easier.
Did some of these not have stones ever, or
Right.
they're gone?
There are a
From
total
some
of 2,273 individuals that we know of buried in Old City Cemetery, and there's at least 710 of them. In other words, practically a third of them don't have a stone or never had a stone. Infants.
So when we look out here where there's not a stone, there are burials.
I'm sure.
Under there, there's just no stone. If they're not spread out as far as we think, they're in there.
They're there.
Okay.
And there are a lot of stones in poor condition in this city cemetery.
But there is a record of who's there somewhere.
Not in that public area that has no lots.
There could be burials there that we don't know who's there.
The first lady buried there was Mr. David Bowman's mother, who died in 1839. She's in that public area someplace, and it's hard to say. There's no stone. 1839 was the first burial in that cemetery.
Now, did they buy plots in that area, or were they?
Oh, in the records it said that the lots were $3 a piece.
Even in the public area, then?
Probably not in the public area. All the ones that are numbered lots were $3 a piece.
Free, wow.
So whether the public area were the people that just really couldn't afford it, Evergreen has a public area to this day that people that couldn't afford to get buried are buried on county money, and it's called the public burial grounds. And maybe we'll get into that when we get into Evergreen Cemetery after a bit.
Okay.
There's been several trees taken down just surely within the last 6 months in this cemetery. Possibly they died, or they were just getting in poor condition, and rather than fall on stones, they've taken them down. It's interesting to note also that the first burials in Evergreen, you could buy a lot for $30, but that had 12 spaces. So it'd be about $2.50 a space.
So I imagine prices have really jumped as along with everything else, and probably, I don't know, 20 times that or something.
Probably.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my thought. I was going to ask a question. Oh, I was going to ask you, you said many stones were in poor condition. Now, is there a way to refurbish them? Do family members down the line, I suppose they could replace a stone if they wanted to? Or what are the options there?
Usually they like to, if it's cracked in two, they like to hire someone to reset the old stone because it's just got that sentimental value to it.
Right. That would.
Okay.
Well, let's. We'll stop the camera and we'll move to a different place. So we've walked a little bit into the cemetery, and you can see the big spaces in between the stones. And I have so many questions, Connie, and I just keep asking you. See if we can remember them all. Right over there is one that's turned over. It's just fallen, vandalized, fallen.
I imagine it's fallen because notice the base is tipped pretty bad. Maybe somebody helped it along.
And also I noticed over here to Richard's left, there's a marker that's still being decorated. So that makes me think there are relatives here.
Locally, or else they've come from afar and just...
What is the newest
stone here?
Stone here.
I think in the 25 years the Genealogy Society's been organized, I don't think there's been over 6 burials in that time period.
Can someone still be buried here?
Yes, they are.
So there's still places available.
Not many. Some of these lots are owned by a distant relative, and you can still use maybe an empty spot that's on that lots of times for ashes rather than the body.
Which probably nowadays is a big percent of burials.
Especially people that may die in California or Texas. There's a lot of cremations anymore. You notice that if you read the obituaries.
Yes. Yes.
Is this where you're going to tell us a story about the leg?
That's over in Evergreen, but I guess I can tell it right now.
I can't wait to hear that.
I wish I could tell you for sure. I think it was in 1939. This man had his leg amputated, and his leg is buried in Evergreen Cemetery. And yet, when he actually died, then he's buried over near Wapello. Wapello County. He's buried over close to Ottumwa someplace.
So we just got his leg.
That's all that was on the cemetery records when I published Evergreen Cemetery, just
He wanted
the
to
leg.
keep his foot in Jefferson County.
When you say a leg, I wonder probably a good deal of his body,
Big,
not just
big chunk of the whole leg.
We're going to walk uphill a minute?
That's totally
Sure.
unusual. Are there other unusual stories like that?
Well, I guess I should tell you that there, many, many years ago, this lady that had no children, they let her bury her pet dog. Now there's one that's broke off. You can see.
Right here.
And it's really, really hard to read whose it is even. And
Which we'll talk about as we go in the other part. She carries flour around in her car, and we'll find out why.
so here's two unusual ones.
What are these supposed to be laying down?
I'm assuming that they've always laid down, because the cement underneath them is shaped accordingly.
Like a casket. Or,
Yeah, it is that. I wonder if these are children here.
Do you?
Smaller.
Are there wooden caskets buried here? Do you know? Who knows?
Oh, I'm sure there are.
Oh, okay.
1839, there has to be.
Right. Now you were saying something about the animal, the pet. There was a pet buried here.
Yes, there was. This is in Evergreen now, not here.
Okay.
But
I assume that's not allowed.
Oh, not now.
Okay.
Is there a pet cemetery in Jefferson County?
How many cemeteries
You're not allowed
are?
to bury your pet with you? Why not?
No.
I think there's a law against that. You guys out there?
You need to get a picture of what we're standing beside here.
This.
The Slagle family.
Go over there. This. I was going to ask about Fairfield historical people, and this would be one of them.
Yeah, Christian Slagle was attorney.
That's a famous name. You'll see it around town. I believe it's on a building or two. The Slagles.
Possibly.
And this has got the date written down here.
What? It would be 1882, maybe.
There's a lot of stuff here that I can't read.
I'm sure glad that the books that Mrs. Prill did were published probably about 1963 when she read this old Fairfield Cemetery.
This is about like a little courtyard for a family, I suppose.
You reckon they mow that with a weed eater?
Now, she didn't come out here and look at every stone.
Yes.
She did?
Mm-hmm.
So there's not records there probably is now, records as when people are buried that this is where they're at.
Right.
But
Prior to that,
there weren't any records to say John Doe was buried over here in this old part, or
in that public area, there's no lot records, but the rest of these, the lots were written down. Lot number 142 was purchased by so and so for so much money, and it's all in the books at the Fairfield Library that Mrs. Prill did.
But she came out here and looked at every stone then?
Yes.
And recorded what it said?
Mm-hmm.
Oh
What
my.
a wonderful thing to do for the community.
But thank goodness it was done at least 30 years ago, but too bad it wasn't started 30 years before that.
Absolutely.
Right.
I mean, I
but-
can't imagine that. What a project to undertake.
But just standing here, just look at all the empty spots.
Sorry?
Just look at all the empty spots. There has to be burials.
In between.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
I'm sure it's not
now,
wasted space.
notice right over there, there's been a tree taken down, surely in the last 6 months. It looks so fresh.
It does. Now, as far as maintenance, you were laughing about taking a weed eater in there, but you said that Ralph Hickenbottom mows.
Yes, he mows both cemeteries. The city hires him to take care of this end of the cemetery. And
And it takes him a long...
takes 4.5 days to mow and weed eat. And
What
you
a
just
job.
get done. You have to start over again, especially this spring early.
Yeah. When the rain is coming, you definitely would you just.
Now right
start over
behind you,
again.
here's 3 stones that are all flat. It's evident that there could be lots done for this cemetery.
Yeah, this one's broken off.
Mm-hmm. And yet the base is still fairly flat, and so it'd take a lot of epoxy glue. This is a brand of mending material they use to glue them back together.
So when you go around and read some of these for your research, you get a lot of information. Children, we were looking over there, there was you said a month-old buried.
Mm-hmm.
And with a quite elaborate stone, I would say, for back then. It's just kind of, you stand out here in awe, I think.
Oh, we're right up here.
Something else to show.
Yeah, something. The bottom half of that stone is out in Patterson Cemetery, southeast of town. This is James Morrow. How this half ever got to Fairfield, wouldn't you like to hear it talk? It just...
Has this been here a long time that you know of?
The first time I saw it, it was probably 4 years ago, and it was leaning up against the cedar tree way up in a different area. And I was dumbfounded when I was researching this. Huey, H-U-E-Y, Dr. Huey died here in 1864 or 5. And I come up here and there was that same piece of gravestone leaning on Dr. Huey's. And it belongs out in the country.
They're not related? There's no reason for it to be?
No, I can't imagine why it ever found its way to town. Because his wife's buried out there in Patterson Cemetery. And when Mary Prill read Patterson Cemetery, the whole thing was there. James Morrow was out
Someone
there.
out there knows about that.
Was it a Halloween prank? Well,
Yeah.
doubtful. I don't know.
The other question I was going to ask is, how many cemeteries are there in Jefferson County?
There's 78.
78.
Mm-hmm. But Van Buren County, I think, has 105. So see, we aren't setting any records here.
Something really unique, I think, is you told me after we did our first show, you said you were looking something up and you found that Connie and I both have relatives almost side by side
Out at Patterson.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that eerie?
And they were both here. They were both here very early, between 1840 and 1845, and yeah, there's your roots, girls, right out there.
Yeah.
And that cemetery was in poor shape, and it was cleaned up in 1987, after somebody wrote a letter to the editor, and the trustees for that township got busy, and it's cleaned up and mowed, and all the brush is cleared out, and
Now, I know there was one, I believe, Eagle Scout that took on a project to clean a cemetery
It was cleaned up first in 1976 for the bicentennial. This is our only Revolutionary War soldier buried in Jefferson County, and it's on the Stockport Road, paved road going to Stockport, southeast of town. And it was cleaned up first in 1976, and 20 years later it's all overgrown again. It's not as big as this area, the Slagle area here.
Oh, there's not, the whole thing isn't that
There's
big.
only one gravestone, but yet in some of the books at the library I found that there were supposedly 14 other pioneers that are buried there with him. His name was Jacob Wiley, and the Eagle Scout and his helpers cleaned it up and put up a new fence around it. I guess I was discouraged 2 years ago. I thought I'd go take a picture, and this was like a year after he'd cleaned it up, but there was no gate to get in it, and there was brush growed a little starting again in front of the stone, and I couldn't take a picture of the stone. I couldn't climb over the fence to cut down the brush.
I imagine to keep vandals out.
Cattle out, or
Right.
no.
But it doesn't take long for things to get out of hand, and
Right.
so it's nice that we have this taken care of.
Are we about ready to head now over to Evergreen?
Yeah, I think we will. We'll take another break.
We've now come down Stone Street. We turned in where it says Old Platte, which is just directly across from where the Kiwanis lunch wagon sits all the time, and it's called Jordan's Circle. And we just are barely inside, and we're looking at the tallest stone probably just about in the whole cemetery. This is Jacob Gantz. He was born in 1835, and he served in the Civil War, and he did have a Civil War diary. And I brought along the book that was published then, and this is in the Fairfield Library. I've got it checked out, but it'll only be checked out 2 or 3 days, so it'll be back if you want to do it yourself. It's called Such Are the Trials, and it is very interesting. It's one of probably 4 Civil War diaries that are in the Fairfield Library.
Do we know who wrote this book?
The diary was found by his great-granddaughter, Catherine Davis, and she had it published at Iowa State University here in Iowa. I met her when she was here. She had a book signing at Kramer's, and just a delightful young person, probably 40, 45 years old.
And so he's buried here.
And his wife.
And his wife. Now also on here, I noticed this, it says born July 28th, 1878, died 1879.
So see, he had a child, Albert, that died a little over a year old, and there's the little girl. Then she was like a little over 2 years old, about 3 years old, and it's unbelievable what this monument might have cost.
Well, that's just what I was thinking. Would he have been he must have been a wealthy man to be able to put up something like this. I mean,
he came back from the Civil War with an injury, and he then ran the Gantz House, which was a hotel. I can't tell you where the Gantz House stood in town. Wish I could. Oh, there's more research all the time.
So what a great book to read and get some Fairfield history of someone that's buried right here.
I noticed something over there, just down the way is a little piece.
Okay.
There's 2 stones toppled over. One is a big one. Look at it.
Yes,
Now, it's had to have help, I'm sure.
Yes.
It's been vandalized. Here's one just right over here. Another one that's got the top part of it's laying on its side beside it. It just goes on and on.
Do we know who the lights are?
No,
There's
I don't.
Okay. Pretty big monument for them.
it would be interesting to ask Kent what something like this would cost. I mean, these really large monuments like this one is beautiful.
It is. All the different materials, different things used. Looks like we were talking about some of them look like they had white splotches on them if they've been painted, vandalized.
I see something right now that I did want to bring to your attention. I was out here this morning. We're gonna walk over here towards our camera, and we're gonna have him turn around, and don't back into something and fall over. We're gonna head for these two white bronze markers right over here.
Bronze.
Oh. They really aren't bronze.
Okay.
They call them white bronze, but they actually are zinc. And this is Phineas Fawcett, and they're, you know.
How old are these?
Well, he died in 1890. These type of stones, there was a foundry in Des Moines, and there was one in Chicago. The one in Des Moines operated from 1880 through 1916.
Are these the only ones in this cemetery, or Fairfield?
There's, I think, a total of 8 between Old Fairfield and Evergreen. We'll take you right over here as we head back to the car, and I'll show you one that isn't too far away over here. It's just a little different, but look how clear they are.
New.
It'd be interesting to know how much they cost. Okay, this one says the Western White Bronze Company in Des Moines, and they must have. There are a total then of 18 in the whole county. Between Therese Comiskey, out at the
Jefferson County Park.
Between her and Berdina Metz and her husband Lloyd, who's deceased, they kind of canvassed the whole county, and it's been done statewide now. Let's go over here.
I wonder why there weren't more of them.
That's made me wonder if they were terrible expensive or why.
Yeah.
So they don't make this kind of.
1916 was just, you know, the end of it. And I'll show you another one if we'll follow on over.
While we're walking over here, we'll have Richard look at this big rock.
Okay.
Is this actually a stone monument?
It was put here as a memorial to Dr. C.S. Clark and family. He was the one that owned the corner where Brown Drug Store.
Another well-known Fairfield name, Clark.
Because his son then was J. Fred Clark. Now here's another bronze one right close by here. And
making our cameraman jump around, but there's so many things here.
But this is a father on this side and a daughter on this side. And right at this moment I can't tell you where his wife is buried, and the married daughter where her husband would be, because you know she's married, she's got a different name.
And what an interesting story behind that, you can only imagine.
It's actually quite lovely.
And this boulder then was moved here in 1907, and I made a memo here of what it said in the paper. It was February 21st, 1907. A 20-ton granite boulder was moved from the country to Evergreen Cemetery as a monument to C.S. Clark family. It was hauled with traction engines. And this was in the Brighton Enterprise. It wasn't in the Fairfield paper. Dr. Clark lived from 1814 to 1882, and so see, it was brought in after that. But
I don't think I'd ever seen that here before, noticed it.
Are
there any other
little goodies?
Unusual, I see something over here. It's got black. I don't know if that's standing up here behind the tree.
Just you
It's
see.
unusual.
Notice the crossover though over there.
Right.
I guess the unusual stone I wanted to show you over here, I guess it's beyond that cross a little bit. I guess nobody's going to want to drive in where we're parked. If not, they're stuck now.
Right, we'll show them what we have back here.
Well, I'll show you tell you what I'm going to show you next. There was.
Following us? I think the cameraman's coming behind, trying to watch his camera and not trip over a tombstone.
Well, it's kind of dry and crunchy. Am I getting too far away from you girls for you to hear my microphone?
Stay closer so that we can pick our sound up. What are these?
Okay.
These are what you want to show us, right?
No, this one right ahead here. This is a 27-year-old man that was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And 9 months after he was born, his parents both died of yellow fever. He was born in 1854. And what do you think? Maybe you could lift the lid, huh?
It looks like it. Is that what we're seeing?
Oh, well.
I know in the south they bury above the ground.
And I can't help but wonder if maybe he isn't too. But I read his obituary in the paper today. It was fascinating to the fact that his uncle then brought him to Fairfield, and at a young age then he became interested in the circus. And he worked for many circuses over the years until he was 27. And he got a bad cold when he was in Texas, and it just was too much. He died, but he had served among the circuses. It named them all. He did work for Barnum before it was Barnum and Bailey, and he never married. He must have been a very, very liked young man here in Fairfield because he visited here often. Of course, his uncle and aunt lived here, but
That was his first name, Leo LeVere?
Leo LeVere. Mm-hmm.
Well, is that one name or two?
I take it to be two separate names. See, there's a little bit more room between the O, Leo, and then the...
Okay, I guess I can see that.
And you know what? This separates.
It does.
This is a separate piece sitting on there.
Susan, your curiosity is going to get the best of you.
Wow. So you can see up under
He must have been a short guy, though.
Separates right here.
This doesn't look very long, Susan.
Well, that's the only problem I'm having.
Why don't you lay down?
Well, I would fit in there.
Okay.
I wonder how tall he was. Maybe that's part of the reason.
Maybe that's why
He's
he's
in the circus.
There's an angel. Oh, there's an angel behind us here.
Was he a midget?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
It didn't say so.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, see, I'm not that
Maybe
tall.
he's folded up. We're stretching it here.
You need to notice the top of some of these bigger stones. You see the draped,
Oh, how pretty.
and there's another one over there, and here's another one. It just
Now, I do want to ask about these right over here. They're just unusual. They look like little bats.
well, and see, here's another one, but this one has a little angel. And so, do you reckon they aren't buried that deep, and then they've got this on top of the casket?
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's obviously, well, this one's a child, but they're obviously shorter too, so.
And I'm sure some of these trees are as old as the cemetery. If you look across there.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're looking now at what's called the Jordan Circle over in that area. I think that's what will take time
outlined, to maybe you can see with the hedge.
We'll
around the
just
circle.
we'll just head that way next.
Okay, that sounds good.
Standing here looking straight west towards B Street along the backboard fence of the Evergreen Cemetery. Maybe, do you think that kitty cat would show up on his camera? The kitty cat way down there is just west of about row number 16 of the public burial grounds.
So they're all unmarked there.
Well, you notice there are...
Where the cat is.
Well, that's just hasn't been used yet where the cat's at.
Okay.
The ones that you see decorated down in there
Right.
are probably some that have been buried in the last number of years that a relative has put up a stone maybe some years after the burial.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they would have been buried on county money. They couldn't afford a funeral.
And that's called paupers, just referred to as...
the pauper's ground or public ground.
And this is just to the west of the Jordan Circle area that we're parked at and coming into.
Something else I should mention while I'm right here, back across the driveway there is the baby land, the first baby land. There are, I think, 3 different baby lands in Evergreen, and that's the biggest one. And there are a lot of babies buried there without stones. But you notice, see, they're decorated year-round. Always flowers kind of in that area.
So are these new ones? I guess I can't imagine people coming and decorating unless they're fairly close in...
The newer ones are up in the other addition.
So someone is just carrying on that tradition
Yes.
of in the family. That's amazing.
There may be some there as late as the 50s and 60s. So
my age. And a little younger.
So, mothers could still be alive
sure.
Right.
during,
Right.
for that time period, could still be decorating their
Right.
children's graves.
Now, the reason I'm carrying this is that she carries it around in her car.
How about this one right over here? This. Now sometimes if you go to take a picture of that, you notice how that marble wants to shine back out at you?
Yeah. Now our cameraman might want to come around so he can see
So he can see what we're going to do.
But it's for, you carry this flower around, and you also had one with dirt in it for working on the light
this
stuff.
is a dark stone, and so we're ready to flower it.
So
This is my little old Fluffy.
you can't read them.
Take a picture of it first, where it really doesn't really bounce out like you'd like to have it bounce out. And then we're going to flower it. We start at the bottom and we just rub up.
Wow.
Now I'll take my Fluffy and fluff off the excess. You ready to take your picture now? You can see it lots plainer.
So you just keep this in your car for...
It rides around year-round.
And you use the dirt to work on the white ones.
Yes.
Did you come up with this trick yourself, or did somebody tell you this?
Oh, it's just been something that's been passed down by genealogists. Probably heard at the 2nd or 3rd genealogy meeting I ever went to.
Well, it sure worked.
Yeah.
Well, especially those dark marbles, they don't work too good with a camera.
And you actually take photos and record what you're seeing for the people
Send them away.
and send them away.
The one I did this morning was going to go to Washington State. Now here, where's the stone? It's gone. Who's there?
Here, let me take your flower.
You want my flower? All right. And here's one that is pretty well, the pieces aren't all there if they try to glue it back together even. There's 2. You notice how the lawnmower scratches them?
Oh yeah, now that you mention that.
I had...
And this would be one that you would use dirt on.
Yes, because
Can you ever read this?
well, the dirt sticks in the holes, see? Now, this has been a more expensive stone simply because, notice, John's name sticks out and the rest of this is indented.
But to me, you can't even, it's like they've lost the letters, but you can find them.
It'll pop out a little bit. Some of them are just about impossible, but it's...
Well, let's
It's interesting.
walk
Should
over
we?
to the Jordan Circle.
And we call it the Jordan Circle because it was laid out in a wheel fashion. Notice right there in the center is our pretty tree. The nice hedge all around it. And I think maybe we'll just walk right over first to Clement Jordan's stone, who donated the first land. And
Now, these aren't all Jordans in here?
they're all related to the Jordans.
Okay.
If they aren't named Jordan, a daughter Jordan has married into the family. But here's these. This was the first lot then, and this is Clement himself, and he was a retired sea captain, and came here in 1851.
Now, how does a sea captain get to Iowa? Of the Mississippi.
He comes over the dry land.
Well, he couldn't find his way back.
This is the wife that died in 1865 that he didn't want put over in the old Fairfield Cemetery, and this is the daughter, Frances Eaton, that died age 43.
A year later, a year after his wife.
And then this is a son whose wife, Maggie, I'm sure maybe she remarried, or because he was only 34. But see, these are just like pieces of a pie here. This is lot number 66 in the old plat. And of course, they were related to the Wells. And this is one circle.
And the other circle's right there.
And the other circle's up over here. And I guess there's another. Oh, look at, here's two of them now with those drapes across on the tops of them. They're just. I've heard Therese Kaminsky gave a real nice program on symbols. You know, the praying hands, or an open Bible. Now here's one. Now there's a cutie pie. Papa and Mama.
Whose is it?
Well, I suppose who's on the other side here. The name is Farley.
So I imagine you have a lot of fun when you come out here and learn some of these things.
You have a lot of fun when you can't find a stone and somebody wants a picture of it, believe me. I thought maybe we walk over here, we could find James Wilson, our first senator.
Okay.
Hopefully. He's the one that, now this is Rollin Wilson, maybe that tall one. It was on the south side of this circle. See, here's another circle, and with a tree in the center. Who's this one over here? Aren't we going to find it?
I think this is it.
Now notice how that just don't show up very good. What my flower wouldn't do for that, huh?
Yeah, I put it down.
That's all right. Let's
Beautiful though.
let's mention. I brought a thing here that told about this.
They don't do pieces this big nowadays, do they?
No.
They're a lot smaller.
When Andrew Carnegie was just beginning his series of donations for the buildings of libraries, his friend Senator James F. Wilson persuaded him to give $30,000 to the Jefferson County Library Association to build the first Carnegie Library west of the Mississippi. A few days later, Carnegie's promise was announced publicly, and in January 1892, Senator Wilson himself gave land for the building. That's the one
The
that
library.
the one that Indian Hills has now. And he was the senator from Jefferson County. That is tall, isn't it?
Now, if you go to Vermont, there's a place near the capital of Vermont where you can watch them mine granite out of there. In fact, I think Kent Whitney lived there for a while he started
Probably
in his business.
At least 10 years ago. I think he was there.
Yeah,
or more.
And we were there a couple years ago, and it's absolutely fascinating to watch these men work in this, I guess it's a mine, you call it. I don't know if it's called a mine, but just this huge place, and you look down in this huge pit, and the guys look this big, and it takes them, I don't even remember, days and weeks to cut out, a big slab of granite, and then they haul it up. It's incredible. If you ever get out to the east, it's very worth seeing them pull out these huge pieces of stone and to make these monuments.
Our genealogy society had probably one of the most interesting meetings in Kent Whitney's shop.
Oh,
And
we need to visit there.
well, he had them in the different stages of being finished, and he just took a step by step by step, because he had one that he was, just drawing the designs for up in the. So many have beautiful things up in the corners now, and
that's a big thing now with stones. I've seen actual portraits done.
Yeah.
And etchings of maybe what represents their life or their favorite part of their life, and
even down to the little windmill maybe out in the country, on a country scene.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So they have changed, but it's really interesting. I think it's really peaceful out here, and a lot to learn.
It took 3 years with volunteers to walk the cemetery and record the dates on the stones, because all we had to work with was, like I said a bit ago, we had the date someone was buried in the cemetery. Sometimes that date isn't like 3 or 4 days after their death. It may be as much as 6 months or a year later if their ashes are brought from California and possibly their spouse died, so they brought ashes back together. But there has to be lots of little secrets out here.
I'm sure, and when you think that you're looking at what represents someone's whole life, I mean, what you want to select or choose, I mean, if you think about what you would want to have, I don't know. It's just interesting to me.
Well, this has been really fun, Verda, to do this and learn about interesting little tidbits like the guy and his leg. That one I can't quite get over.
I guess as we head out the driveway in the car, probably most everybody realizes maybe this was a little holding vault, this little building you see. If it was bad weather, they often put the casket in the holding vault until they could get it buried. And it's now just used for storage. Ralph said they, don't use it anymore.
When did they stop doing that?
Can't tell you.
Okay. Also, another little piece of information, on the newer section, there was an old section where the mausoleum was.
Oh, yes, that's now considered the 6th edition. There's a corner of that is set aside more for some babies. I think it's in that 6th edition.
Now, I remember when the mausoleum existed, and I think it was probably during Parsons' days, it got tremendously vandalized. And as I admitted to Connie, Verda, a friend and I, we were going to climb in, and one of us did climb in, and then we got in, and we were so scared we couldn't wait to get out, help the other one out. But there were like beer cans and things in there, and trash, and
most of those bodies were reinterred in Evergreen in a new lot, and some of them are in area cemeteries, and then there was, I think, 34 of them that none of the relatives claimed, or they couldn't find relatives, and they're all buried in one long row over here in, I can't tell you which edition. You know, this cemetery goes humpy, 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 and I kind of lose track of which edition they're in, but it was a mass burial of all these last 34.
And it hasn't been too terribly long since that was taken down and the area made...
Was it maybe 72?
Oh.
Has it been later than that?
I think it might be later than that.
Okay.
But
see, I didn't bring that
flies.
statistic, did I?
Time flies.
Now, if somebody wants to find a particular person, then they go to the library.
And the book tells you what, there's an alphabetical index, and the book tells you exactly what lot number they're buried on, in which section. See, there's original plat where we're standing, and then there's first edition, second, third, fourth, fifth, and hardly any burials then in the sixth edition. And there is no map in the library that's clear enough to really indicate where the lot numbers are. The map I had to put in the book was shrunk from about 36 inches by 60 inches, and there was just no way those numbers would show up on that map. And so
Now, is that the same for all the cemeteries in the county, though?
No, there's very few plats. Abington Cemetery has a plat. I'm sure Packwood does. Lockridge does. But the small country cemeteries, no.
It's a matter if you find out they're buried, you just got to go and look until you find them.
When Mrs. Prill copied them, a common practice is snaking back and forth, you know, down the aisles. And this is the way, you know, she copied them, and she numbered them then as she went. You know, first one was number 1 and so on. And it makes it easier for somebody like me, if I'm going to go out and take a picture of a gravestone, then to help find them, I can find who's laid 4, 3, 2 stones away, and if it's missing, then either get ready to dig and see if it's fallen over, which often happens.
You have to dig sometimes.
I know. I brought you a picture when I dug.
Did.
I dug for a stone for Joel Bates, never knowing I was going to meet Susan. That was in '87, so 12 years later we're talking about it.
Yes. One other thing is you mentioned the total number in this cemetery, both parts, was like 9,000.
Just in Evergreen is 9,737 as of 1990. And 1,246 of them at that time had no grave marker. That's like 1 out of every 7 didn't have a, when we walked the cemetery then, we couldn't find a grave marker for that person. You could probably find an obituary maybe, but at that time they were burying about 100 per year, and I don't know what Ralph's statistics would be now, whether there's more than that or less than that, but that had kind of seemed like an average.
Well, Verda, thank you very much. You lead a very interesting life. Finding all these things out, and thank you for opening this door to our past and maybe a door to someone else's interest in reading the book that we had, or going out here researching.
Or just go to the library and realize, oh, there's more here than I ever thought I'd find. So.
Oh, yes. And again, we'd like to thank Whitney Monument, for sponsoring this show today of Opening Doors in Fairfield.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.